Do words directly cause harm? Do words directly cause harm? According to a study by the American Academy of Pediatrics, on-screen violence causes increased aggressive thoughts and behavior, as well as decreased empathy in viewers. The same could be said of hate speech, whether it's by politicians, celebrities, or people you know. When people hear other people saying things that are hateful for whatever reason and whatever group it's aimed at, it gives them permission, basically, to think that's true and to imitate that kind of speech, says Diana Zuckerman, president of the National Center for Health Research. So, do words cause harm? According to the president of the National Center for Health Research, yes, indeed, they do. And according to the study done by the American Academy of Pediatrics, that images, on screen violence specifically, increases aggressive thoughts and behavior, as well as decreases empathy. So, what does that mean? It means you have a propensity to not feel sorry for the people that you see being denigrated. The same can be said for hate speech. The things that you say or that you hear said in your presence can cause you to view those that are being spoken about in an unfavorable light, in a manner not fitting for a human being. But they go further to say, when it's a group that's already vulnerable because they're already discriminated against, maybe even by members of their own family, let alone others. Those are the people who are going to be emotionally more harmed by it, Zuckerman says. I know some people get very upset about political correctness. Can't we joke about anything anymore? People shouldn't be so sensitive. But it's very different when you're a member of a discriminated group. And here's what I found most interesting. And even if it's difficult to quantify whether words directly cause harm, we shouldn't celebrate it, says Lanier Holt, who is an associate professor at Ohio State University, studying the effects of media messages on audiences' perceptions of marginalized groups. This was an article on USA Today. And, I find this very interesting. Being being a man in a place where men such as myself, men who resemble me, men who come from where I come from, men who represent the community that I belong to, there has been no greater marginalized group, no greater discriminated group, no group that has been targeted with a larger amount of hate speech or hate crimes. I am talking about the Black American man. I am talking about the man who was at one time not considered a man, but three-fifths of a man, and not just by common law, but viewed by the institutional powers, the government, as three-fifths of a human being. Prior to that, viewed as subhuman, to be equated as a farm animal, similar to a bull or a cow or an ox or any other beast of burden, a mule. Yet this article that I read from in USA Today has nothing to do with the group that I described. This article is titled, or the headline for this article is Netflix's support of Dave Chappelle is setting a dangerous precedent. And here's why. This is the headline of the article in which I just read those two passages that contain the two passages I just read. Forgive me. You know, Dave Chappelle has been all over the news for the past week for seemingly all of the wrong reasons. Simultaneously, we have another headline that has dominated the news cycle. We have Mr. John Gruden and this email scandal that has since caused him to resign as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, The thing that got me about both of these articles or both of these headlines, both of these news stories was the similarities as well as the differences, yet the outrage or lack thereof, and the defense of what is seemingly so indefensible. See, when I first saw this headline, the word that jumped out to me out of all of this, John Gruden, trigger word, because, he's a celebrity. So you hear that name, that can trigger things. Racial, that obviously brings about certain images to mind. But the word that jumped out at me was the word trope, because this is a word that I am not accustomed to seeing following any type of racial context. I've never ever heard or seen or read this word being used when describing something racial. And so I decided to get on my phone and open up my Merriam-Webster dictionary app. And when I did, I looked up the word trope because I wanted to be sure that I was not mistaken in what I believed that word meant. And according to Merriam-Webster, the word trope is a figure of speech. It's a figure of speech or a cliche, so to speak. So, in essence, when you see this headline, it is saying, in essence, that a racial figure of speech was used or a racial cliche was used to describe NFLPA chief DeMaurice Smith. Now, why is that important? That's important because words are powerful. Words are extremely powerful. If you believe like I believe, and I believe in a creator, I believe that creation was created through the spoken word of God. Now, this is my belief, and I'm not one to push my beliefs on others. However, I will say that the belief in the power of words is not just mine, it is universal. Thus, all the books that exist in the world, all of the news articles that are written, the history that is documented, these paint stories, they paint pictures of what occurred in times long past. And these things are taught to future generations that they will always remember what occurred before them. These words shape and mold the young minds of future leaders. Words are indeed powerful. And as I read at the top of this broadcast, words can cause harm. And in knowing this, I believe the word trope was utilized for a specific purpose to minimize the impact of the racist connotations behind the statements that were made. Describing the comments as a racial cliche without saying cliche by using the word trope and then having that same word parroted by every other major news outlet and pundit. It is my belief that that was done purposely to minimize the impact, which is why, even though it was a story, the outrage was scarce, minimal at best. So much so that a I can't even call it lame, a pathetic attempt at an excuse for an apology was made by Mr. John Gruden to dismiss the racial intent, the racist intent behind the statement. Now, obviously, the statement itself, the trope, so to speak, was this: dumb Boris Smith has lips the size of Michelin tires. Gruden wrote about Smith in dumb Boris Smith has lips the size of Michelin tires. Now, racial trope, racial cliche, racial figure of speech. That's what the headline says. That's the Wall Street Journal. Now, the most obvious disrespect, the low hanging fruit, if you will, It's the reference to the size of the man's lips, which we all know is a common trait. Full lips, full nose, full figures are common traits among Black Americans and ethnically indigenous people, really from all over. And to say that, he has lips the size of Michelin tires. Now, here's the thing. On the surface, it's hilarious, all right? On the surface, it's hilarious to exaggerate something that you already view as a deformity, right? I mean, we've all been young. We've all, you know, bagged on each other. Because they called it playing the dozens in the previous generation. I don't know what the current generation called it, capping or what. I don't know what they call it now. But we've all clowned each other, right? But the clowning was done in what was assumed to be a safe space. You're clowning with people that are of a similar mind. Why is this important? Because birds of a feather, right? Now, it's one thing when you're talking amongst friends about friends. You're in the presence of each other. You know, you clown him, he clowns you. You clown her, she clowns you. Everybody laughs. Every now and again, if the jokes are super funny, somebody gets offended. We've all been there. But in this particular case, there was nothing funny about it. Yes, it was meant jokingly amongst friends, but we all know about the racial cliche, the racial figure of speech that has always been spoken of or referred to by white people that have racist views. They feel that there is something abnormal with full lips. And so comments like, oh, lips the size of Michelin tires are made. And that in and of itself was one thing. But the doubling down, the doubling down is, I think, what bothers me the most because this was, again, a pathetic excuse at an attempt to apologize because he says that, or he said, forgive me, he said, and I want to bring this up for you to be able to see this yourself. He says, He has in the past referred to people he believes to be lying as rubber lips, and that he took it too far. I was upset, Gruden says. I used a horrible way of explaining it. I don't think he's dumb. I don't think he's a liar. I don't have a racial bone in my body, and I've proven that for 58 years. Nobody ever in the history of ever has referred to anybody who lies as rubber lips. I looked it up. I can't find now, I have not done months or even weeks of research. I dug around for about 20 minutes and I could not find one single reference to people who lie as having rubber lips. Or maybe my research skills suck. And if that's the case, then I'll take that. But I don't think my research skills are that horrible. And I think that this attempt to explain oneself is again pathetic because we all know the cliche, the figure of speech, the trope of black people and big lips. But that is not what bothers me the most. What bothered me the most was the dumb Boris Smith instead of, his name is Demoris, so dumb Morris. That to me is more disrespectful than talking about his lips. Because even though these are racist stereotypes, again, we're accustomed to, the lips and the noses and everything being talked about. There's not much we can do about that. That's how God designed us, and we live in that. We walk proudly in that. This is the reason for a lot of botched Botox and silicone injection jobs and all of that nonsense, but that's another topic for another day. But the dumb Morris is so utterly disrespectful. And here's why. To refer to a black man as dumb has always been the pleasure of racist white men. For this reason, it was literally, not figuratively, not descriptively, it was literally illegal for black people to learn, for black people to read or to do math or to study sciences, to study arts, culture, just to learn the ABC, just to learn how to spell the words you spoke would be met with extreme punitive measures. families would literally be ripped apart. Children not even stolen away, just taken right in front of you and sold off to the next plantation. Beatings, obviously. And in some cases, even worse. These were punishments for learning how to read. And when we as a people were finally legally allowed to learn, there were a lot of us who took advantage of that, who took full advantage. So much so to where the illiteracy rate dropped from almost 100% to around 10%, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look back in Black Labor, White Wealth. Shout out Dr. Claude Anderson. But I believe the literacy rate increased to over 90%, where basically nobody was allowed to read, so nobody knew how to read. Within a decade, over 90% of the population was literate. That that denotes the passion, the hunger for knowledge. And that is since carried down through many generations of people. Those that were fortunate enough to have escaped the designed poverty by the powers that be. They were able to give their children a middle class education, thus smoothing the path for future generations. And Mr. DeMaurice Smith is no exception. See, not only is Mr. Smith not dumb, he is the furthest thing from dumb. The man is beyond brilliant. See, we know him as the president, I believe, or executive director of the NFL Players Association. That's how he came to prominence in the larger public eye. But prior to that, this man worked for two of the biggest law firms on earth. On earth. One of them, actually, according to gross earnings, I believe, is the biggest law firm on earth. Let me hold on. Let me bring. Um, yeah. Okay. So this here, according to his Wikipedia page, prior to his work in the NFLPA, DeMar Smith was a trial lawyer and a litigation partner in the Washington, D.C. offices of Latham and Watkins and Patton Boggs. Okay, so Latham and Watkins, this one here, an American multinational law firm founded in 1934 in Los Angeles, California. Latham is the second largest law firm in the world by revenue. Forgive me. So I said the largest, it's the second largest by revenue. Right, the profits per partner exceeding over $4.5 million per partner. Then he goes on to Patton Boggs, right? Patton Boggs is a firm with 45 offices in 20 countries, formed in 2014 by the merger of multinational law firm Squire Sanders, a Washington, D.C. based Patton Boggs. It is one of the 30 largest law firms in the world by total headcount and gross revenue. This man is a lawyer. Um, he was serving as the chair for the firm's government investigations and white collar practice group. He also served as counsel to then Deputy Attorney General Mr. Eric Holder in the U.S. Department of Justice before entering private practice. He spent 9 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office and one with the Department of Justice, working on issues like national security and prison construction, which is very, very interesting, by the way. Smith has also represented Fortune 500 companies and argued numerous cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit and the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. So, very accomplished man. Received his doctorate of jurisprudence, right, or doctor of law from the University of Virginia Law School, which was started by Thomas Jefferson. I did not know that. But needless to say, a very highly educated man, a very accomplished and educated man with an impeccable track record as a professional who has no doubt conquered countless racist situations that were engineered to hinder his progress. And here you have a mediocre at best professional football coach calling this man dumb. I said mediocre, and I meant that. John Gruden was never a great coach. See, I can remember when John Gruden was with the Raiders and Jerry Rice was a Raider. Rich Gannon was a quarterback. Rich Gannon was an MVP candidate. I don't really recall whether or not he won. I want to say he won. And they were favored to win the Super Bowl. And Tampa Bay pulled off a trade. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's some sort of incentive, like they gave up draft picks and money and some crazy deal uh, to acquire John Gruden as a coach. And it just so happened that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with a phenomenal Hall of Fame caliber squad, Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, you know, Keyshawn Johnson, John Lynch, like they had a squad. I don't remember if Mike Allstott was a part of that team, but anyway, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers met the then Oakland Raiders in the Super Bowl. And the Raiders ran the exact same playbook that they had ran the year before underneath their former coach, who was now the current coach of the team that they were facing in the biggest game of their lives, their careers. And so Tampa Bay mopped them. Since then, John Gruden has won absolutely nothing. I don't even recall John Gruden having more than a handful of winning seasons, if that. But he was such a hot name, such a hot media personality that he was able to quickly secure a gig with ESPN. And he was able to parlay his quote unquote football expertise into high ratings on Monday Night Football. Now, a couple years back, he gets a call from the Raiders. Come be our head coach again. We're going to give you $100 million, a 10-year contract. Of course, who's not going to take that? And in those 4 years, the Raiders have been absolutely terrible. John Gruden is a mediocre coach. But because he is a privileged white male, he can glibly refer to a highly educated, highly accomplished black man as dumb. And that's what I have the biggest problem with. Because the man may be a lot of things. I just read an article. He barely kept his job by the skin of his teeth as NFL PA director. There were some internal issues brewing as far as the direction of his leadership. There are some misgivings by some of the player reps regarding the nature of his relationship with the owners. There are issues. The man is a lot of things, I'm sure, and not all of them good. Because none of us are. None of us are all good. None of us are all bad. Some of us just more so than others. But one thing he is absolutely unequivocally not is dumb. Which leads me to, well, actually, no, yeah, which leads me to my next point. Now, this happened. This happened a while back. Right? You have this black kid, this black tennis player, John Wilson the fourth. He was a senior tennis player at, I guess that's North Carolina A&T. A white tennis player suspended after saying, "At least I know my dad," to his North Carolina A&T opponent. The Aggies' John Wilson IV says he's heard these kinds of comments before. Now, this happened, right? This happened 2018. January 30th, 2018 is when this article popped up. And even though this didn't get a lot of national media traction, every single time an issue like this popped up back then during this time, there was always the same talking point. This is Trump's America. Why? Because Trump is a racist. And now, since he's the commander in chief, he's also the racist in chief. So, therefore, by default, by proxy, every single racist act in America can be attributed to former President Donald Trump. Here's the thing about this. At least I know my dad. Here's a kid in a tennis tournament playing another kid in a tennis tournament from a completely different school. This, what school did he go to? Appalachian State. Okay. This is the kid's name right here, Spencer Brown. This is the white kid that told this black kid during a tennis match, at least I know my dad. Now, my question is a few questions, but my first question is how much does or did Mr. Spencer Brown, how much did he actually know about John Wilson IV? How much recon did he do? Did he know that he comes from a single parent background? Did he know that his father was not in his life? Or was this yet another racial trope? I would contend that it is the latter and not the former. And here's why. Because when I actually read into the article, two things stand out to me. First of all, Mr. John Wilson IV was a senior. He was a senior. Mr. Spencer Brown was a freshman. So you have a freshman talking trash to a senior during a tennis match. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. Now, the second thing, which I think is just as, if not more important, is this. As we scroll all the way down to the bottom of the story, right? Because Appalachian State suspended him. They suspended young Spencer Brown. He got suspended for conduct that didn't represent the athletic program. He suspended Brown indefinitely after his comments. Yada, yada, yada. Right. Okay. So here's what's important. Spencer Brown won the match 6-1, 6-1 against Wilson, and Appalachian State beat North Carolina 7-0. 7-0. Brown won the match 6-1, 6-1. He beat the piss out of Mr. the Fourth and still felt the need to hurl that insert, that racial trope, that racial cliche, that racial figure of speech, still felt the need, still had the desire to let that fly. Even after you'd mopped the floor with him. 6-1, 6-1, he didn't stand a chance. As a senior, you were a freshman and you beat the brakes off of this dude. And you still felt the need, you still felt the desire to sling that at him. At least I know my dad. So just whooping him wasn't enough. You had to really hit him where it hurt. This is a freshman, or was a freshman. Forgive me, because this happened back in 2018. He's probably a junior or senior now. And he's basically fresh out of high school at the time, right? Because this came out January 30th of 2018. So which means he's a freshman, so he's coming out class of 2017. He's only been in college 4 months. He's fresh out of high school. You know what that means? He's fresh out of his parents' house. Now he goes to Appalachian State. First of all, well, I'm not even going to get into that. That's another topic. You are 4 months out of your parents' house, and you're obviously a pretty skilled tennis player if you're a freshman and you're playing against seniors. And not only you playing against seniors, you beating the snot out of seniors. But then you let words like these fly, and that brings to mind, in the TK Kirkland vein of thinking, who raised you? You want to know who raised him? It's people like this. It's people like this. People like this raise people like this. People with these types of views, with this type of privilege, with this type of spirit, they are molding the minds of the future leaders of our society. They are influencing directly with their words the lack of empathy for those who are already marginalized. America's pastime is racism. Racism is so American, as we are told, as the cliche goes, as the old trope goes. Racism is so American that protesting racism is seen as un-American, right? Colin Kaepernick? I wonder what's in those emails pertaining to the Kaepernick situation. See, I think that's well, I think we're getting lost in all of the minutia. I really believe, and this is just me, the reason why the big stink was made about John Gruden's emails regarding every other community but the black community. And this, again, there was no serious outrage. It was a news story and it did gain some traction. But his black player still decided to play for him that Sunday. Had they all band together and said, nope, we're not doing it. We refuse to play for someone with those views pertaining to people who look like me. They would have been penalized contractually, I'm sure. But if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And once they saw that they will fall for anything, they go out and play. Oh, okay. Well, here's all these other emails that are misogynistic and, you know, talking about the LGBT and, just everything else. Here's all of this stuff. Now he has to go because racism just wasn't enough in and of itself. Why is that? Well, this huge stink has been made about Dave Chappelle regarding the LGBT community, and everybody screaming, cancel, 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 cancel. He has yet to be canceled. So, what do we do? Well, somebody has to be canceled. And if not, then the bigger story, the bigger issue will then arise, which would be the um the collusion amongst the owners to blackball Kaepernick from the NFL. If emails were being sent so openly, speaking racist, misogynistic, offensive terms to all groups and communities of people, sending naked pictures or topless pictures of cheerleaders and all the rest of these things being sent through company channels without reservation or restriction, then it makes you wonder, like, then this was all just nonsense, just foolish. Just again, like-minded people speaking like-minded thoughts. Well, how much deeper does this go when it comes to Kaepernick? Like when there was really a situation in which all owners needed to stand in solidarity with one another and be in constant communication, not just with each other, but with each other's entire football operations, all the way down to the scouts to ensure, all the way down to the media to guarantee that this man would not get a shot. And if he did, it would be on their terms, to where they would effectively muzzle him when it came to speaking out against racial injustice specifically. And so they cast Gruden as the sacrificial lamb. They sacrificed one of their own, knowing that he would be none the worse for wear, because his contract, from what I understand, is fully guaranteed. So basically, they're just paying him to go away. He still owed another $60 million or some odd something on the contract, which they will honor. He just won't have to do anything to earn it anymore. Though it's not like he was doing much to earn it to begin with. Again, another topic, another broadcast. I've been hearing a lot that the NFL, what's been going on in the NFL, is a microcosm of our society. And I'm inclined to agree. But here's where I would beg to differ. It is not so much a microcosm as, or the sheer amount of power and leverage that is possessed by the majority that can be exercised amongst the few and isn't. As to where in general society, you have the masses stand up periodically. It doesn't happen consistently enough, but the masses do stand. But when they stand, they don't stand in solidarity. They stand in disjointed pockets. And so because of that, they're infiltrated, they are gunned down, they're cut off at the knees. If change is truly what's desired, solidarity is a must in any endeavor. Doesn't matter what it is. The fall of Jericho. God instructed the people of Israel to march around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, when the trumpet blew, they were to all yell in unison as one in solidarity. And that is the only way that the walls would come tumbling down. They did that. And they conquered that city. God himself came down, according to the Bible, to intervene in the endeavors of man, because man dreamed of building a tower high enough to reach the heavens. And God saw that man was standing in solidarity. Man was united in their objective. And he knew, because nobody knows the creation like he who created it. He knew they're all of one mind. There's nothing they won't be able to accomplish. And so he confused them. And thus it's referred to as the Tower of Babel. allegedly, right? I'm not quite sure on the theology behind the story. But it is a must that we stand in solidarity if change is to ever truly be affected. And again, where the NFL differs is that we in society as large do not wield the type of power that you within the league, within these leagues, wield. Because there are 31 billionaires, because the Packers don't technically have an owner, right? They have shareholders or something like that. So there are 31 billionaires that could effectively be brought to their knees overnight if the right plan, the right leadership, the right execution took place while everyone stood in solidarity. So that's where I would beg to differ. The league has the resources to be able to withstand such an onslaught. You know, Joe Sixpack doesn't have that luxury. There is no band of brothers, you know, whose salaries are in the tens of millions that could come and pool resources together to form a kitty, a survival war chest, so to speak, to be able to withstand, you know, a long, drawn out negotiation with the powers that be. Joe Sixpack can't do that. But you, players in the NFL, the NBA, you can. You choose not to. And that's the difference. With you, you would at worst lose a salary. Joe Sixpack would lose his life. And that's where I would beg to differ. Lastly, I want to leave with this. There's so much anger, so much hostility in the air, in society, everywhere you look. People are angry. People are tired. There's a lot of pent up frustration. Unless change is instituted and instituted quick, this will not end well. We must educate ourselves, all of us, no matter what you identify as, no matter which group or community you subscribe to. The key to all of it is understanding. And there is no understanding without education. The Bible says, in all thy getting, get wisdom. If it costs you all you have, get understanding. That's where it begins. If we can truly educate ourselves to the point where we can take the time to empathize with one another, only then will the words lose their sting. Only then will the words not be as powerful, because only then will these words not be spoken. Thank you.